welcome to another episode of the Growth Blueprint. And in this episode, we're going to be talking about metabolism. And a lot of people misunderstand metabolism. So we're going to set up an analogy here, and I'm going to look at my computer just because I wrote this analogy very specifically. But this misunderstanding of metabolism, it really sets people up for a lot of poor attempts at weight loss. I think that it is to blame for a lot of the failures that you see coming out of fad diets, coming out of different weight loss pills. So I want to talk about what metabolism actually is so that you can understand how to make decisions to increase your metabolism so that you can have more successful weight loss attempts and be successful with your weight loss goals. So first things first, I want to set up an analogy. And the analogy is this: our metabolism is like a fire. And something that is actually just really interesting is our metabolism literally is the same chemical reactions as a fire, which is kind of interesting. So the analogy is a little bit more real than you might think initially. But anyway, imagine your metabolism is a campfire, okay? It provides energy, calories burned, that our body needs to function, to lose fat, right? Our goal is to create a steady, long-lasting, efficiently burning fire, right? That's burning a lot of fuel. It's burning a lot of calories, okay? And so each fire, any fire, right? A campfire has several parts, and our metabolism has several parts as well. And so the first thing that people get wrong about metabolism is they think that it only has like one or two parts. And they think that some people have big fires, some people have little fires, and the people with the bigger fires can lose weight more quickly. And the size of the fire that you have is dictated by your genetics. And if you got a big fire, that's great. And if you got a little fire, well, it sucks for you. And that's just not true. But unfortunately, that's how a lot of people think about metabolism. And so now I want to kind of get into metabolism using this analogy to help kind of lay this out. And then we're going to talk about ways that you can enhance your metabolism so that you can be more successful with your weight loss journeys, have more energy, literally. Your metabolism is the thing that creates energy. And so we're going to get into the finer details of metabolism. So metabolism is made up of four parts, and you can see those right here. And so the four parts are something called BMR, or basal metabolic rate. And basal metabolic rate is all the stuff that just kind of keeps the lights on. It's kind of like paying your bills. It's just, your heart needs to beat, your brain needs to do brain things, your hair, skin, and nail needs to grow, like you got to be able to move, like your muscle needs to not die. It's just the basic keeping you alive stuff, right? It's if you laid there and you didn't do anything all day, and you just laid there for 24 hours, you would need energy to exist. That's your basal metabolic rate. Next, you have something called NEAT, and this stands for non-exercise activity thermogenesis. And what this means is you've noticed me gesturing as I talk, right? I'm not really thinking about gesturing, it's just kind of happening. But it's unconscious movement that you're not consciously performing. That's what non-exercise activity thermogenesis is. And so you can't increase your NEAT. You can't increase your NEAT by going on a walk. This is a common misconception on the internet right now. But your non-exercise activity thermogenesis is, shifting your weight while you're standing, you're gesturing while you're talking, how frequently you might like touch your face. Like it's just unconscious movement that happens throughout the day. And it actually makes up a significant portion of your overall metabolism in general. Next, you have something called the thermic effect of food. And so just like you can't take crude oil out of the ground and put it in your car, right? The crude oil needs to be processed and turned into something that's usable. The food that we consume needs to be processed and turned into stuff that we can use as well. And this processing takes energy. And so actual food choices, as far as macronutrients are concerned, impact the amount of energy required to process your food and turn it into usable sources of energy, of materials, so on and so forth. And for a little side note, protein takes the most amount of energy to process. And so by consuming a diet and higher in protein, you're actually going to demand more energy to process that, therefore helping your body to burn some extra calories there as well. And then at the very top, you have your exercise activity thermogenesis. And your exercise activity thermogenesis is your conscious movement, right? So this is anything that you decide to do for the sake of the movement, right? Going on a walk, going to the gym, doing your cardio, blah, 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 whatever. So let's actually talk about how this works into the analogy of a campfire. So your basal metabolic rate, okay, this biggest portion here at the bottom is like the logs at the base of a fire. It's what your fire is mainly burning, okay? And so again, BMR represents the energy that your body needs to just stay alive. And your campfire, your bonfire, needs a good amount of good sized logs to stay alive. And it's going to derive most of the burning that it does from these big logs. And without having good sized chunks of wood in your fire, you're not going to have a very good fire. Okay, and so supporting our basal metabolic rate so that it can do the calorie burning that it needs to do to elevate our metabolic rate to function optimally is really, really important to making sure that we have a well-burning, good metabolic fire going on in our body. We're not going to talk about what optimizes this quite yet. We're going to do that later, but I just want to tie these analogies together so that when we do explain how this works, we understand why we're looking at things the way that we are. So next we have our non-exercise activity thermogenesis. This is like the sparks and the kindling that get a fire going, okay? And so this is what keeps the fire going throughout the day, right? You can't just burn a fire with big logs in and of itself. You need to use smaller bits of fuel, things that burn a little bit more easily, so that you can maintain this fire and keep it going for a long period of time. Now, non-exercise activity thermogenesis is an unconscious process, right? So there's not anything that you can do right off the bat to impact your non-exercise activity thermogenesis, but we are going to talk a little bit later about what you can do to increase that and things that can decrease it that are going to work against you when it comes to burning fat. Next, we have our thermic effect of food. And this is like adding new adding new wood into this fire, okay? As we add new stuff in, there's an initial burst of flame, right? As it catches these new things on fire and starts to burn them as well, right? We're stoking that fire. We're adding things into the fire to continue to help it burn. And so protein in this analogy, it's like high quality wood, right? This is wood that's going to burn longer. It's going to burn bigger. It's going to help bring that fire up and continue to make it bigger and bigger and bigger. And next we have our exercise, right? Our exercise is like blowing on the fire, okay? Obviously, if you blow on a fire, it's going to help it burn more and more, right? But you can only blow on a fire so long without adding all this other stuff to it in order to continue to get it to burn, right? If you're not adding big logs in to keep that fire going for a long period of time, if you're not adding smaller things in to stoke it up, if you're not adding new things at all, blowing on that fire isn't going to help make it any bigger. It's going to make it bigger for a short amount of time, but in the long run, you're going to use up that fuel, and no amount of blowing on that fire is going to continue to help it burn at all, right? So that's our little analogy of our metabolism when it comes to a fire. We have our basal metabolic rate, which is the heart of the fire. It's the big logs. It's the stuff that the fire is really feeding off of. We have our non-exercise activity thermogenesis. These are the smaller things that the fire is using to continue to burn as it's using up those bigger logs as well. And then we have the thermic effect of food, which is the stuff that we're adding in to continue to burn that fire and keep it going. And then we have our exercise, the cherry on top, to stoke that fire a little bit. But we can't just exercise without everything else. So now let's talk about optimizing all these things. Let's talk about how we can actually increase our metabolism, how we utilize the different things that we have, both behaviorally and nutritionally, to make sure that we have the biggest fire that we can. And so if we go back to the beginning where we talked about some of the common misconceptions that people have regarding metabolism, people think that you either have a big fire or you don't. And this is just simply not true. On average, most people have basically the same metabolisms. There might be some variations here or there of a couple hundred calories, but not the vast differences that people assume that other individuals have that make them skinny, okay? What happens is the ability to either do the correct things to make that fire bigger, right? And this is where like nature versus nurture comes in, right? We're all actually born with all of the things that we need to make a big fire. But what we're taught as children and the habits that we pick up as we grow up and turn into adults, these are the things that inhibit, in the vast majority of people, inhibit the size that their fire can get, because nobody ever taught you how to do this. And so this is the whole point here, is to teach you how to make this fire bigger and work really better. So we're going to focus on basal metabolic rate first. How do we actually increase our basal metabolic rate, this biggest piece of our metabolism, the main part of our fire? Well, one of the best ways to increase your basal metabolic rate is to sleep well. Good sleep is the number one thing that we can do for our basal metabolic rates. And so an interesting study that they conducted, where they took people and they put them in something called a metabolic ward. And a metabolic ward is like a hotel that you check into and everything is done for you. And so they took these people and they put them in these rooms, and these rooms are contained, and they're measuring the air, they're measuring the oxygen in the air, the carbon dioxide in the air, and by doing this, they're measuring how much you're burning, how much your metabolism is burning, because we are inhaling oxygen, exhaling carbon dioxide, and that's our exhaust system. So you can measure our miles per gallon, so to say, by putting you in this metabolic ward. Also in this metabolic ward, they're measuring your metabolism, they're giving you exactly what you eat all day, and they're telling you exactly what to do for exercise. And so what they did is they took people and they fed them the exact same amount of food. They had them do the exact same amount of exercise. And what they did is they impacted people's sleep. So they controlled everything else except for people's sleep. Everything was the same, right? But the thing they were messing with was people's sleep. And so what they did is they had one group of people get a good amount of rest. I don't remember exactly how much sleep that they were getting, but let's just call it 8 hours. This may or may not be correct, but one group got 8 hours of sleep and the other group was sleep deprived. And in the sleep deprived group, what they found is that it completely eliminated their ability to lose weight. And so what they found in the group that was sleeping, remember, the calories they're consuming are exactly the same. Their metabolic rates, as measured from the carbon dioxide and oxygen intake, were exactly the same. And the amount of exercise they were doing was exactly the same. And in the group that was sleeping, that group lost weight. And in the group that wasn't sleeping, that group did not lose weight. And they did not lose weight because the lack of sleep was impacting their basal metabolic rate. It was causing their basal metabolic rate to decrease, to suffer, because it was impacting the efficiency of their body as a whole. And so sleep is the number one thing that we can do to increase our body's basal metabolic rate. And sleep is something that's very oftentimes overlooked. Most people say, well, I'll just exercise more, right? They focus on blowing on the fire, not actually feeding the fire and making sure that it's set up with a good foundation to become that big fire that it needs to be and that we all want it to be. So sleep is the biggest thing we can do for our basal metabolic rate. The second biggest thing we can do for our basal metabolic rate is exercise. And so exercise burns calories over here, right? But what it also does is it helps our body function well. And a good frame of reference to think about this in is we were made to move. Our bodies evolved to move. And if you think back to hunter-gatherer times, our physiology works the same as those people's did way back in the day, right? And they moved a lot. Our bodies evolved to move. Our systems evolved to move. We evolved to be highly active individuals. And so when we're not very active, our body systems suffer and they do not function as efficiently as they could be functioning if we were more active. And so increasing our activity level not only impacts our exercise through calories burned there, but it also helps our basal metabolic rate increase because it's what our bodies were designed to do. Okay, moving on to our non-exercise activity thermogenesis. There's not really anything we can do to increase our non-exercise activity thermogenesis, okay, which is unfortunate, and I know, boo-hoo. But what you need to know about it is that it is highly adaptable. It's very malleable. It changes a lot. And so it changes a lot based on a couple different factors. One of those being sleep, once again, right? Sleep and exercise for that matter. And so our non-exercise activity thermogenesis If you think about the last time that you did not get a lot of sleep, you probably felt sluggish. You probably felt bleh. You probably didn't want to do a whole lot of extra activity. This is the unconscious downregulation of non-exercise activity thermogenesis. Another example is when you're sick, right? When you're sick, even the smallest of tasks like getting up to go to the bathroom, getting up to get water, right? Some of these, even these small insignificant tasks, all of a sudden are these giant things that we have to do when we're sick. And what that is it's the downregulation of our non-exercise activity thermogenesis, okay? And so what happens is our body reacts to the situation that our physiology is in, and it can downregulate and upregulate our non-exercise activity thermogenesis in such a way that it can reduce or increase the calories that we're burning through that module of our metabolism. And so how do we actually increase our non-exercise activity thermogenesis? To my understanding, the only way to increase your non-exercise activity thermogenesis is to eat more food. And so in the research that I've read, the biggest impact of our non-exercise activity thermogenesis and overall weight loss comes from calorie restriction or calorie addition. And so what they found in the research is as you decrease your calories, your non-exercise activity thermogenesis also decreases, because you're basically saying, I'm going to reduce the energy going into the system, and your body says, hey, the energy coming into the system is getting lower. Let's not move as much as we have been so we can conserve that energy. And so our non-exercise activity thermogenesis is more or less just something to know exists, because again, it's all unconscious. So there's not really anything we can do about it, but we need to understand that as we lose weight, by eating in a calorie deficit, which we must do, right? We're going to decrease our metabolism by decreasing our non-exercise activity thermogenesis. This is why it's really important to be tracking your macros. This is why it's really important to be monitoring your weight on a regular basis so that you can see how your metabolism is adapting to a lower level of energy intake, so you can be aware of what's going on, so you can make the necessary adjustments to your calorie intake, to your exercise, to your sleep, based on how your metabolism is responding. Moving on to our protein, right? These are the added fuel that we're putting into our fire, right? When it comes to, did I say protein? When it comes to our thermic effective food, right? We're gonna focus on protein. And the reason that we're gonna focus on protein is because protein takes the most amount of energy to process into the usable form that our body needs. And so when it comes to what takes the most amount of energy, protein is first, carbs are second, fat is third. And so what we can do is we can focus on increasing our dietary protein intake. And by increasing our protein intake, this is going to be like adding high quality wood to this fire. Wood that's going to burn well, dry wood, so it doesn't have to dry out before it burns, right? Wood that's going to burn well, that's going to burn long, that's going to help that fire get bigger and bigger and bigger. And so increasing our protein intake is one of the primary things, it is the primary thing to do when it comes to increasing our body's thermic effective food so that we can increase our overall metabolic rate. And then last but not least is the exercise. And the point that I really want to drive home here is that exercise is not to be used to burn calories. Exercise needs to be used to support the other aspects of our metabolism, our basal metabolic rate, our ability to sleep, right, which is then going to impact our non-exercise activity thermogenesis. It's going to impact our hunger, right? Exercise is used to help us overall with our health as an individual. It's not there to help us burn calories. And again, let's use this frame of reference of hunter-gatherers, right? If we were bad at maintaining a good fuel efficiency with calories when it comes to movement, okay? So if we could exercise and burn a lot of calories and lose a lot of weight, that would have meant that all of our ancestors would have died. Because what did they always have to be doing? Hunting and gathering food. They literally just spent their entire lives hunting and gathering food. It's why we call them hunter-gatherers. And so they just exercised all the time. They moved all the time. They slept, and then they got up and they moved because they had to go find stuff to eat. And so if we were not fuel efficient, if we burned a lot of calories with movement, we would have all run out of energy and died and starved, right? And so our bodies adapted to be able to be super fuel efficient when it comes to movement. And so by being super fuel efficient, that's why exercise is such a poor way to look at trying to lose weight, because you're picking the thing that we are best at doing for a long period of time that burns the least amount of calories to try and burn the most amount of calories to lose your actual body fat. And so rather than focus on increasing our exercise for the sake of burning calories, we want to focus on quality exercise that supports the other aspects of our metabolism to help the other aspects of our metabolism work well and create that big bonfire that burns the energy that we want it to burn. And so when it comes to exercise, my recommendation is like 3 to 4 days a week of resistance training and throw some walks in the mix. Like just keep it simple. Keep it something that you can do on a regular, consistent basis that helps support your sleep, that helps you feel good, that builds some muscle, right? And helps you support the logs, the kindling, and the new fuel coming in to actually build that big bonfire up that we want to have for our metabolism. So that's what I got as far as metabolism goes today. I hope that was useful. As always, your time is your most valuable resource. And so if you spent that with me today, I hope that I made it worth your time. If you learned something, please rate the show. I don't promote anything on the show. It's just I don't promote the show all that much either. So if this was useful, rate the show, share it with somebody that needs to know this, that's consistently stuck on their cardio machines, especially in this new year, so that we can help people make good decisions about setting themselves up for success, because that's what I want to do. I want to help people be successful in their health and fitness and do things the correct way. That's why I do this. So share this with somebody that could need it. And as always, I will see y'all in the next one.